Welcome back. Thank you very much. We're going to now have a guest, David Nouks here, who's going to tell us about the wonders of GcMAF. And I think this might be one of the most important and enlightening things you've heard for a long time. So thank you very much for coming, David.
Thank you, Clive. Right, well, GcMAF is a human protein that all healthy people have inside them. It has 20 attacks on diseases that we know of at the moment. The immune system doesn't work without it, and of course the immune system can get rid of about 6,000 different diseases. So it's a very, very important protein in your body. However, if a disease comes along, and this includes cancer, the disease will try to prevent production of your own GcMAF. And it can do that if you are weak, if you have a down period, if you are stressed, if you've eaten too much sugar. You are giving the enzyme nagalase, which diseases send out, a chance to prevent your body making GcMAF. And
So is that M-A-double-F?
it's spelt Golf Charlie, Mike Alpha Foxtrot. So if that happens, you then lose your 20 attacks on various diseases. 6 of GcMAF's attacks are on cancer, and you lose those. So if the disease that is taking down your GcMAF happens to be cancer, if successful, the cancer will then explode and take over, and you are usually dead in about 5 years. There are about 1 billion people, we estimate, in the world who do not have GcMAF inside them because of disease. So 6 billion people have it and about 1 billion don't. Obviously, as it's a human protein, as all of you can attest, it has no side effects, and you can attest to that because you have it inside you now. So what we do in our company, in our laboratory, we extract GcMAF. We can extract it from blood or milk, only obviously from healthy blood or milk, because unhealthy blood or milk won't have it. It's a 24-step process, and we end up with 1/1000th of a gram of GcMAF, which is what we administer. 1/1000th of a gram. That is all you have inside you. So we then give this GcMAF, which we have to suspend in saline solution because it is such a small amount. We give this GcMAF, and there are 5 ways of getting it into the body to people with disease, and within minutes of getting the GcMAF back into your body, your attacks on the diseases start up again. And the last thing to start is your immune system. It takes 3 weeks for your immune system to be rebuilt. It's stunning, really, how many diseases can be cured by GcMAF. Autoimmune diseases. We had a chap come in over the moon. He was in and out of A&E. He had all sorts of diseases related to his autoimmune condition. They've all gone now in, I think it was 3 weeks. It can cure herpes, not all the time, 50% of the time, in about 4 months. It cures ulcerated colitis, IBS, most of the time. Diet is what makes the difference. GcMAF starts life out in the body as GC protein, and GC protein's made in your liver, and the GC protein is made into GcMAF by your immune system. A B cell comes along and takes 1 of the 3 sugar cells sugar molecules off the GC protein, and a T cell does the same, and you're now left with GC protein with 1 sugar molecule, and that is GcMAF.
Sorry, can you repeat? Yeah, that last chunk that you said.
Right, how the body makes
From
GcMAF.
GC protein turns
Right, so your liver makes GC protein. 3% of your blood is GC protein. And a T cell from the immune system comes along, takes one of the 3 sugar molecules off a GC protein molecule, and then a B cell does the same, and now you have GC protein with only 1 sugar molecule on it, and that is GcMAF. But it only does that to a tiny amount of your GC protein because you only have a billionth of a gram of GcMAF inside your body. It's the most important billionth of a gram you can think of. So, in the body, GcMAF and GC protein are part of the vitamin D pathway. In fact, one of the names of GcMAF is vitamin D binding protein, which means GC protein. Vitamin D binding protein macrophage activating factor, that is one of the names of GcMAF. It's actually a misnomer. Back when it was first discovered in 1990, 24 years ago, they thought all it did was rebuild the immune system and activate macrophages, which is why it was called macrophage activating factor. But that's only 1/20th of what it does. And in the laboratory, we have a laboratory where we are doing research all the time. We have 4 eminent scientists. One of them's here today, Linda, and we work with the University of Florence, who's also working on GcMAF, and that's how we got the number of actions of GcMAF up from 2 to 20, these 2 laboratories working together. Perhaps we got into GcMAF because we wanted to do something about cancer, and it was the hardest way to go in because it makes you very unpopular if you do anything with cancer. When we first started out, we were curing stage 2 cancers. Not all of them, but probably 80% of them, fairly easily. And then we learnt about the protocol, what we call the protocol, the nutrition. And the protocol is very simple. It's at least 2 shots of GcMAF a week, 0.25 ml. That's actually 2 billionths of a gram. That's putting in double what you need. And you have to take vitamin D because it's part of the vitamin D pathway, and it only has 40% its power if you have low levels of vitamin D, and pretty well everyone with cancers got vitamin D down at the 20 level instead of the 60 nanograms per milliliter that they should have. So you've got to take vitamin D. You cannot eat sugar because Otto Warburg found out 40 years ago and wrote a paper on the very simple fact that cancer feeds and lives exclusively on sugar. And this is such a well-known fact in science, it's totally indisputable, and yet you won't find one oncologist who will tell you to stop eating sugar.
And that's why in the NHS they're giving people hot chocolates on the cancer wards for the sugar.
You walk into the NHS into a cancer ward and you look at the food they are feeding them and you are absolutely horrified.
Shocking.
They have no idea what they are doing. Then, of course, carbohydrates in the body turn into sugar. So if you are fighting cancer, you must not eat carbohydrates or sugar. You must eat meat, fish and vegetables because you need the lipids. Some vegetables are more important than others. Asparagus and broccoli spears seem to be the most important. And finally, the last part of the protocol is in the last stages of cancer, people get anorexia cachexia. That is to say, most people die of starvation because their bodies can no longer digest food. And we give people MAP proteins. And branch chain amino acids are a similar thing, but the ones we use are pre-digested. And one pill is the equivalent of eating a whole chicken, and we can put on, in a dying person, we can put on 3 to 4 kilos a week in weight with these MAP proteins. But anyway, the final result of our adopting this protocol, which is, you know, the vitamin D, eat the right things, is that we now regularly cure terminal stage 4 cancer people if they have 2 months to live, providing they have not had too much chemotherapy, because if they've had too much chemotherapy, it wipes out their blood and immune system counts. So you're putting the GcMAF into the body, you're basically putting it into an empty void, it's got nothing to work with, and those people die. But if you haven't had too much chemo, if you do the protocol, then if you are terminal stage 4 cancer with 2 months to live, you can confidently expect to be cancer free in a year. Now, we open 3 clinics. We can't do anything in England. In fact, we don't even like supplying GcMAF in England because the laws are so bad. I must come back to that if you remind me. So we had to open our clinics in Germany and Switzerland. And we didn't really know what the law was in Switzerland. So we asked people not to come unless they had at least 3 months to live, because we didn't want to annoy the Swiss authorities by having people dying in our clinic. Well, 5 people effectively didn't tell us the truth and arrived after the point at which their doctors predicted they would die. Of those 2 did die. The other 3 we sent home with 25% tumour reductions and put them on the path to become cancer free. So 60% success at the point of death is pretty good. So in the clinics, what we actually do is we employ 5 doctors in the clinics, and we use ultrasound effectively to squirt GcMAF onto the tumour inside the body, and the ultrasound guides the syringe. We can also use the frequencies. We know the frequency of GcMAF in GcMAF, so that we can drive it in the right direction. And you can actually see it. You can actually see the GcMAF. Actually, we only use GcMAF in the clinics. You can see the GcMAF being driven into the tumours. So on the first week they get a 25% tumour reduction on average. The worst we've had is 8%, the best we've had is 40%. On the second week though, of course, you've only got 75% of the tumour left, so we get rid of 25% of 75%. So on the third week, we haven't got rid of 75%, we've generally got rid of about 50–55%. And we send them home then to do the protocol, the home protocol if you like, that I just explained to you. And you'd be amazed, something like 20–30% do not do the protocol at home. It's surprisingly successful with pancreatic cancer. Everyone thinks pancreatic cancer is a death sentence. Well, when we get pancreatic patients at the clinic, they get the same tumour reduction that everyone else does. And if they do the protocol, they too can expect to be cancer-free in about 6 months, because we get rid of 50% of the cancer in the clinic, so they don't have to do a whole year, they only have to do about 6 months. We had one very nice chap called Paul, who has 3 little airplanes in the USA, and he's mid-70s, most of the people are 60s, 70s, 80s. And they're all terminal. Pretty well everyone arrives as terminal. He had pancreatic cancer, and his pancreas had stopped producing insulin. The cancers had grown, the tumours had grown so large, he couldn't produce insulin anymore. So he arrived at the clinic with his medication, with his insulin medication, which he was injecting every day. He got a 25% tumour size reduction in his first week, And he also got the bonus that his pancreas started producing insulin again, and he threw his medication away. So he stayed for 3 or 4 weeks, and he got excellent reductions. And he's one of the people who then didn't bother to take it when he got home. He's still alive now, but very, very disheartening for us. I'll tell you a couple of interesting stories. We had this woman arrive, who I will call Deirdre, and she walked through the front door, walked upstairs to the treatment room, sat down and died. And I maintain that's not 3 months. From downstairs to upstairs is not 3 months in my view. Anyway, she comes from Geordieland, Newcastle, so her relatives are having a real go at our staff. We're going to close you down, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Meanwhile, our 2 nurses were beating the living daylights out of her dead body. And after 45 seconds of this, they restarted her heart and breathing. Lynn over there got a 40% tumour reduction in her in a week. She's back in Geordieland. She's doing the protocol absolutely ruthlessly, and we expect her to become cancer-free in the next 6 months. Yes, so I think Lynn can take all the credit for that.
Come on, Lynn.
Yay.
So that just goes to illustrate that death is not necessarily a barrier to becoming cancer-free. And one other case I'd like to tell you about is a woman who went to our Bayreuth clinic, which is in Bavaria, very close to the Czech border, northern Bavaria, very beautiful German countryside. And she arrived terminal stage 4, expected to live 3 weeks, and her left breast was just solid, dripping tumour. There's no breast there, just ugly, horrible, raw tumour, which went right through into her armpit. But rather surprisingly, she had no secondaries. That's all she had. She was going to die just from that one cancer. So they managed to get a tumour reduction of 40% in 1 week. GcMAF, one of the many things that GcMAF does is it isolates tumours. So it surrounded this odd-shaped tumour with pus. They sent her in for surgery the following Wednesday. So she did a week in the clinic, finished on the Friday, went to surgery on Wednesday. They plucked the whole thing out. Surgeons plucked it out incredibly easily because it wasn't connected to anything anymore. And she became cancer-free in 11 days flat. Now, that cancer will come back if she does not stay on GcMAF for another 8 weeks. She needs to be absolutely certain that the cancer has gone and that her own body's GcMAF has started up again. So she needs to take, it's a precaution if you like, she needs to do another 8 weeks. And if she does, that'll set her up for the rest of her life. Her GcMAF will start up again, and that cancer will never come back again. I wonder if there's any other stories I should tell you. Well, we have a number of people in Guernsey where we live. We have a woman who was terminal stage 4, well, she had breast cancer, but terminal stage 4 because of her liver, which was just full of cancer. She came to see me and said, right, well, you will be cancer-free in a year. She'd got this from 3 doctors. She's got scans, she's got everything. You know, you are going to die in 2 months. She's heard that from 3 sets of doctors. So I said, right, well, you will be cancer-free in a year, but you do have to do exactly what I say. And she did. She did exactly what I told her. She did the diet, she did everything exactly right, except she did drink 2 bottles of red every day. But red wine is actually good for you. and she was actually cancer-free in 11 months. She had a full set of scans. Her liver was normal. All the cancer had gone. She got a completely normal, perfect liver, and she is still cancer-free. In fact, she goes down to our clinics and mentors in our clinics, because it's good for people who are just starting the treatment to meet someone who's already finished it. Another woman who mentors for us is Gail. She was terminal stage 4 with 3 months to live with ovarian cancer and secondaries to the lungs. The GcMAF cleared out her lungs in 3 months flat. It halved the size of the ovarian, and then it all went pear-shaped because she was stage 4, and this was back in the time when we only knew how to treat stage 2. We didn't know about the diet and everything. And then she had a big bust up with her partner, and the stress of that brought the whole lot back worse than it was in the beginning. But by that time we had learned about the diet, so then she had to be cured all over again. So it actually took her 3 years to end up cancer-free. But she is completely cancer-free, and she mentors as well. So I don't know what else to tell you. Yes, a question, Sean.
I find with cancer, obviously, most people know cancer tends to come back again and again. How do you resolve that?
Right. Well, cancer only comes back again and again if you don't have GcMAF in your body. So that is why we make people carry on for 8 weeks after it appears they're cancer-free, to make absolutely sure that all cancer has gone. So if you are going in for surgery, when a surgeon cuts, he releases cancer cells which float around the body and cause secondaries that you die of 2 years later. But if you are on GcMAF for 3 weeks before the operation and 8 weeks afterwards, you will not get secondaries, and surgery becomes very, very safe. If you have prostate cancer, they do biopsies, and again the needle is so big it breaks open cancer cells which float around the body and cause secondaries. If you're on GcMAF, you can have biopsies perfectly safely. And I must tell you about another chap, Peter, who arrived with terminal stage 4 prostate cancer, Gleason 10. Now most people get to Gleason 9 and die. He actually made it to Gleason 10, probably because he's only 55 years old. And he had 2 or 3 weeks to live. His face was ghastly grey. He had lymphedema on his legs. The cancer was falling out of his calves. He had to wear body stockings to hold his calves together. He couldn't really walk, and he was in great pain. After 6 weeks of GcMAF, he was walking an hour a day for fun. After 3 months, he had no symptoms of cancer whatsoever, no pain, nothing at all. The pain went at 6 weeks. About a year, 2 months later, we can see on ultrasound scans that he still has a bit of a tumour in his prostate. We can't be certain whether it's encapsulated or whether it's scar tissue, but in any case it's still reducing at about 15% a month. So we expect him to be completely cancer-free in about, well, another 8 months perhaps. So he may be 20 months from start to finish. But then he was an exceptionally difficult case. We always cure prostate cancer. It's a piece of cake. We always cure lung and breast cancer, which are very easy. Bowel cancer's more difficult, and bone metastases take longer. Yes?
What about brain cancer?
We're a little worried with brain cancer because what the immune system does is it firstly swells and inflames tumours as the first part of attacking them. Well, that can give you intracranial pressure. Now, if you whack a large dose of GcMAF in, its other attacks often reduce the tumour size in the brain. So that when the immune system comes along a few weeks later and has a go, it's too late. The tumour's already shrunk. Works very, very well with cyberknife surgery, because with the surgery you can reduce the size of the tumour, and then you really don't care whether the GcMAF swells the tumour because you've got all that extra space there. Oh, and we do that in our clinic, by the way, very successfully. We treat brain cancers in our clinic quite confidently now.
Brain degeneratives. Have you had any experience with that?
Right. We actually found 10 of the things that GcMAF does, 10 of its actions, and 3 of them are on the brain. It reactivates microglia cells in the brain, and it has beneficial effects on neurons, and between those two it actually creates new neurons. So we predicted in the paper we wrote that it would be good for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, and what's the other one?
My father's got progressive supranuclear palsy.
MS.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a new one. Well, clearly.
Okay. Well, it's worth trying it. We just can't say.
Yeah. I think he's keeping up with my dad. He's kind of open to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have absolutely no idea whether it works, but I've stopped saying adamantly it will not work because I've been proved wrong too often. So we had this father, Nigel, whose 2 children have LMBBS, and only 300 people in England have got it. And basically that is like chronic fatigue syndrome, in that you feel like death, you can't get out of bed, 18 hours a day in bed, and you can't hold a job down. But in this case you go blind at the age of 25 and you die at the age of 40. So it's a pretty nasty thing to have. So his 2 children, son and daughter, were hopelessly depressed, and in 2 months all the symptoms of LMBBS had left both of them, and absolutely incredibly their opticians reported that their maculas were growing back. Their eyesight is improving, and at the rate they're going to be able to drive in a year.
Where you mentioned Parkinson's, I know that my dad's got this Parkinson disease. Parkinson, can't see it. It's part of the Parkinson's family.
Yeah.
So what improvements did you see with someone who had Parkinson's?
Well, this is the trouble. We really got into this the wrong way around. We got into it because we wanted to help people with cancer.
Yeah.
And of course we are upsetting incredibly powerful chemotherapy pharmaceutical companies, and there have been 7 attempts to close us down as a result. If we had gone in another way, perhaps the way you're suggesting, we would have had a much quieter ride.
Yeah, right.
But because we went in with cancer, no one is looking at us for Parkinson's or this sort of stuff, so we don't have patients for that.
I've got a patient in my dad if you want one.
Okay. See me afterwards.
Okay.
Have you had any success with motor neuron?
I don't think it would be successful with motor neuron disease. We have 8,000 patients. About 3,500 of them are autistic kids. We improve 85% of autistic kids. 25% of them become free of autism. And they go back to normal school. Yes, I think so. Yes. Yeah. But in our clinics, and actually the figures with ME are somewhat better than that. We have this brilliant group, the Chester ME Self-Help Group near Liverpool, run by these 2 incredibly bright women who have a file that thick on every one of their members. And we know for a fact that we 85% cure 70% of people with ME CFS. And that would have been a good way to get in, but we had no idea it was going to do this at the beginning.
Can't you rebrand? Can't you just rebrand?
Well, yeah, that's not a bad idea actually. Close everything down and start up again. Don't tell anyone that it's good for cancer.
Word of mouth.
Yeah. So yeah, we've got 8,000 patients, and I would think then probably 2,500 are cancer, quite a lot are ME, and then it's scattered over all sorts of things. We had a taxi driver who'd got ulcerative colitis, and he'd be driving along with passengers, be completely unable to control his bowels and have these nasty accidents in front of passengers. Well, he's now got complete control of his bowels. Took him about 1 month, and his ulcerative colitis is just disappearing every day. My programmer had Crohn's disease, and so we put him on GcMAF, and we've been sending it to him for about 14 months, and to my fury we found out that actually he was cured 6 months ago and he hadn't bothered to tell us. And we do have enormous problems with feedback. Everyone ticks a box. They go to the website, they fill out the form with their name and address and tell us what they've got, and then they tick a box. I promise to give feedback, and 80% don't. And even my own programmer won't give me feedback. So it's a bit of a struggle getting the data together. We have perfect feedback in 2 places. That is Guernsey, where we live.
To get it from you. We'll get the feedback.
So
It's only a few phone calls and
exactly. So in Guernsey we have perfect feedback. We have 120 patients in Guernsey, and they are the only ones who come to our house. And we say, have you done the 10,000 IU of vitamin D today? Did you take your 2 shots? We make absolutely certain they do the full protocol. And not only is the feedback best in Guernsey, but the results are best in Guernsey, because we force them to do the protocol. And we do have some quite astonishing results. It is also a upsetting thing to be doing, because we get people come in with terminal stage 4 cancer who've had chemotherapy. We ask to see their bloods, and when we see their bloods, we know whether they're going to live or die. If they've had too much chemotherapy, the bloods will be awful, and we can't tell them they're going to die. We have to tell them, oh yeah, this is definitely going to work, because, you know, Lynn's actually saved one of these. So we can't tell them you're going to die, because actually 1 in 20 of them won't. But we had a 17-year-old boy die who'd been chemoed to death, literally chemoed to death. Devastating for us, devastating for Lynn, and you know this is happening all the time. So when should you use chemotherapy? May I have an answer to that question, please?
never.
You
Is it 0.3%? Is it 3% in the oncology? 3%. So 97%. Just a waste of time.
You're absolutely right. It's actually, chemotherapy is supposed to contribute to the improvements in 2.3% of cases. Yeah.
But
But
placebos do better than that.
yes, placebos do
What
better than
about
that.
the
Absolutely.
radiation?
Sorry.
What about the radiation, radiotherapy, tablets and stuff?
Cyber knives can be good. Mainly radiation just destroys the person, just as chemotherapy does. But cyber knives is very targeted and it's very good for the brain. But that's the only place I would use it. But you're absolutely right, you should never use chemotherapy. You'll always bump into someone, well, I took chemotherapy, saved my life. Well, okay, but actually, you'd have done better just to have done the diet. If chemotherapy saved you, you'd have been a lot better off with the diet, would have had better effects and no side effects. So there's no time when chemotherapy is indicated. But oncologists tell you that when they arrive, they lie to you that the only options are slash poison burn, chemotherapy, radiotherapy and surgery. They lie. And they say, no, there is nothing else. Absolute lies. There are half a dozen treatments for cancer which have been used successfully in the last 100 years that have saved thousands and thousands of people. You've probably heard of Isayak.
Oh yeah, Asiac tea and
Yeah, so what happened with the Sayak is American Indians would watch animals that had cancer and see which herbs they ate. And they remembered those herbs because they didn't write anything down, and that became the recipe. And that was given to a nurse called Renee Case. And Isayak is Case backwards. And she was curing people with cancer in Toronto, Canada. And the town that she lived in, which was called Bracegirdle or something, gave her a hospital for $1 a year, and she had Americans pouring over the border in ambulances, and a few months later they'd be driving back in their cars. She was curing thousands. Well, of course that couldn't be allowed. The chemotherapy pharmaceutical mob had a word with the borough council and got the hospital withdrawn from her, and she had to close down. It's a very evil world out there.
Dr. Raymond Wright that happened to as well, isn't it? The Wright machine.
Yes, yeah. So the power of the pharmaceuticals is stunning. They have about a turnover of 795 billion. That's half the all dollars in the USA, mostly in the USA. It's half the GNP of England, and their men sit on the boards of British law-making bodies, and they have changed the law in Britain so that only their product is allowed to be prescribed by doctors. Doctors are only allowed to prescribe the poison of chemotherapy. That's the only drug they're allowed.
Why don't doctors say that?
Doctors are ruthlessly controlled by their professional bodies, who are stunningly corrupt, and if they step out of line, they are struck off ruthlessly. Yes, Richard?
Yeah, what would the cost of someone with cancer at home taking your product, what would the cost be roughly?
Well, a vial is 450 euros. I mean, we don't do anything in England. The laws are so bad in England, we do nothing here at all, so it's all done overseas. So it's for, well, Switzerland, Germany mainly.
But you say in Guernsey,
well, we don't do anything in Guernsey. We're not allowed to do anything there.
okay, you do the 8-week follow-up in Guernsey.
Yeah, we do the follow-up. Yeah. We do the admin in Guernsey. So it's 450 a vial, which does 8 shots. 450 euros.
And you need 2 shots a week? 1 shot a week? Okay.
Well, as part of the research we did, we found out that its other 4 actions on cancer have a half-life of only 3 days, so we now say take 2 shots a week. But if you are terminal stage for cancer, the more the better, so take 1 ml a day. But in our clinics we actually give 2 ml a day, because different people respond. You know, some are brilliant responders and need very small amounts, and some are awful responders and need huge amounts. Well, to be belt and braces, we give everyone huge amounts, because we desperately want to send them home with a 25% tumour reduction, so we don't care what it costs in terms of GcMAF, we just make sure they get the results. So yes, this $795 billion chemotherapy mob, their lobby is worth $1 billion. They control Cancer Research UK, their men sit on its board, and Cancer Research UK actually has a wholly dishonest webpage rubbishing GcMAF. And in it they say that it all depends on just one scientist. I'm sorry, there are 180 scientists who've written research papers on GcMAF, and they are lying. Simple, straightforward fraud. And I consider that the Cancer Research charity is a huge fraud, because the cure for cancer was discovered 24 years ago, and they're still raising $500 million a year fraudulently in donation.
Folks read quite a lot about
Sorry?
We've had them on Facebook quite a lot about that because theirs is one of the adverts that comes onto your page
Yeah.
whether you want it or not. So every time
Yeah.
it comes into my page, I remind them. And people are learning because people that normally wouldn't associate with my sort of stuff are
Yep.
seeing those comments.
Yeah. I mean, if Cancer Research UK was in the least bit interested in getting rid of cancer, it would go back to one of the 6 proven cancer cures that have come out of the last 100 years. You know, just diet will stop stage 3 cancer in its tracks. Diet will cure stage 2 cancer. Why aren't they pushing that? They don't, not even slightly. Why aren't they pushing a celiac? Why aren't they pushing GcMAF? Because they are the front end of the chemotherapy companies. And Macmillan is just the same. 2 very evil charities. And then there's another charity, so-called charity, Anti-Cancer Fund, the Anti-Cancer Fund. They are going around trying to get research papers on GcMAF retracted. And unfortunately it's rather easy to do, because to put a research paper up, you have to have it peer reviewed by other scientists. But to take a research paper down, you've just got to convince the admin clerk that this is a bad paper, and the admin clerk will take it down. It doesn't go to peer review. So they've already successfully and completely fraudulently, with totally fraudulent arguments, and one of the 3 doctors involved is actually marketing a competing product, which they conceal in their submissions. But they took one down without us noticing. It was all done behind our backs, no one knew. The other 2 we seem to have stopped them. But you know, one of them was ours. We made the front page of Onco-Immunology journal. These are all very prestigious scientific journals. And we've actually written 22 research papers of our own, one of which is in the top 5% most read research papers of all time. So we've got 4 very brilliant scientists headed up by Professor Marco Ruggiero, MD, and we put out about 1 research paper a month. Our research paper on the 2nd of January this year, first one, found the place in the human brain where autism resides. So in most people, this part of the brain, which is in the subarachnoid space, is 1 millimetre thick. In autistic kids it's 3.4 millimetres thick. So you can actually watch a child's autism grow, or you have a perfect way of measuring autism for the first time in autism's history. And another thing that happened was Professor Marco Ruggerio's mother had breast cancer. And she had it all tested at a hospital in Italy, and they've got all the numbers, absolutely everything, you know, terminal stage 4, you know. So Marco says, well, you better come to my clinic for 3 weeks, because he was the first doctor in our first clinic. And he got a 40% tumour reduction. The whole thing was surrounded by pus. They just plucked it out. Easy. It had actually invaded the pectoral muscle, you know, but it had come back out of the pectoral muscle while on Goleic, which is our own version of GcMAF, which is a bit more powerful. And she went back to the hospital. Now, she had tested positive for the HER2 oncogene. Do you know what an oncogene is? Well, in your DNA you have genes, and sometimes the genes go bad. They mutate and become an oncogene, which is a gene that generates cancer cells. You can't turn these things off, but once you've cured cancer, your body, all of us make about 10,000 to 100,000 cancer cells a day, and the GcMAF in our bodies gets rid of them. So you can't turn the oncogene off, the HER2 oncogene off, but your body, the GcMAF in your body, it doesn't matter, it'll keep killing the cells the rest of your life in the normal way. However, when they got her back to the hospital and they tested her again, the Goleic had turned off the HER2 oncogene, and this is the first time it has been done in a human body in the history of mankind. They've done it in the lab before, but they've never done it in a human body. So what's Goleic? Well, it's what we use most of the time. It's basically GcMAF with oleic acid, and we put this molecule together because it's 25% more powerful in the human body than straight GcMAF, and it oleic acid, of course, you find in olive oil and in the human body. And it's more robust, so you can nebulize with it, and you can make suppositories out of it, which you can't with straightforward GcMAF. I think I should just perhaps ask if there are any questions.
Is there anything that you can increase your GcMAF in your body, other than eating broccoli and asparagus?
No, we don't know a way that can be done yet.
Could you explain the results with kidneys? Kidney failure?
Yeah. So when we first started out, we had this chap from Sardinia, and he had everything under the sun: EBV, hepatitis B, and chronic cirrhosis of the liver. It took a year to cure his hepatitis B. He was only taking 0.25 ml a week, and we didn't know about the diet then. We can probably do it a lot quicker now. It took him 16 months to be completely cured of chronic cirrhosis of the liver.